Anyway, thank you for coming out on a cold winter's evening. And Betsy has left me instructions on exactly what to do. And if I deviate from the script, I ask you, please do not tell her. But she wanted me to thank you profusely for coming out, as you know she would if she was here. And she has a representative here, she and Steve, that is their son David, sitting there, and he is filming this. So tonight we want to remind you to mute your cell phones so that you don't interrupt the speaker. And on the table behind you will see copies of the last meeting minutes prepared by Secretary Pat Yanarella. Likewise, there are copies of the Treasurer's Report prepared by our Treasurer Steve Conrad. Members may pick up copies of these documents as they desire. If there are any questions regarding either of these documents, please direct them to the Secretary or the Treasurer. If there are no objections from the members, we will dispense with the reading of the minutes. Are there any objections? There being no objections, we will proceed with the meeting. I might remind you that my wife Carol is back there, and she will take your dues if you wish to pay them tonight. And also, I want to remind you that we have the throws for sale, and they are $45 each. And I have some more in the car, but this is a sample of what we have to sell. These are in support of our marker program around the county. So we have almost exhausted the monies that we had that were bequeathed to us by Bruce Ferguson. And we have created a number of markers around the state. The more recent ones is the CCC program, which is commemorated in Walton. Please notice that the cotton throw featuring the iconic locations in Boone County. We are taking orders this evening, and we will fill them at the conclusion of the program. At this time, we will hold an election as announced in the last meeting, and as both the November and January newsletters. Two Board of Directors terms are expiring. These board members are Betty Poole and Brent Johansson, and both have expressed their willingness to continue for another 3-year term. And the remainder of the Board of Directors has agreed to recommend both their names for your consideration. We will consider these positions one at a time. I will now open the floor for nominations. If anybody would like to nominate someone else other than these two. Do we have any such? We have none. The first one to come up will be Betty Poole. All in favor of Betty Poole, please raise your hands. Any opposed? None opposed. The next item is Brent Hanson. All in favor of Brent for this office, please raise your hands. Opposed? There being none, he is elected. On March 15th, the meeting will be held in the Boone County Library, the main facility, and I will be presiding the program about George Catlett Marshall Jr., an American statesman and soldier. Now I'm very pleased to introduce Boone County Assistant County Administrator Matthew Webster. Mr. Webster was assigned the task of determining the fate of this historic building, the old courthouse that housed the county locus of government for many decades prior to the construction and opening in 1982 of the new county courthouse, what today is known as the County Administration Building. Mr. Webster was charged with working with the Citizens Committee, the architects and planners, the builders and contractors, and anyone else that was required for the restoration project. He has been with the county since 2016, and prior to that, he was Vice President for Operations and Community Affairs for Thomas More College. He holds a law degree from the Grande School of Law at the University of Louisville. Please welcome Matt Webster.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. It is my great pleasure to be here tonight. I want to say thank you for braving the cold weather to come out and learn a little bit about this wonderful structure. I can tell you the very first day I started for the county, it was 2014, Judge Moore and the county administrator sat me down and said, the very first project we want you to work on is to figure out what purpose the old courthouse should have, and then how do we fulfill that purpose. So this was the very first thing I was charged with, and it's very gratifying to have dedicated it in November and to reopen it to public use. I am a lawyer by education, not a historian, but I don't think you can truly appreciate this building unless you know a little something about the history. So I'm going to try to play the part of a history professor just for a few minutes to put a little bit of context just how important this building is to Boone County. You know, it's very interesting to me that the county seat has always been here in Burlington, and the county courthouse has almost always been right here on the very spot that we stand, but this is the third building that has served as the county courthouse. So in 1801, there was a log cabin that served as our county courthouse. In 1817, they knocked that down and built a two-story, much larger facility, and then by 1889 realized they had outgrown that and built the facility that we are standing in today. It was built at a whopping cost of $19,740. I think we got our money's worth for the building. And it was built by the McCarvey brothers in Cincinnati under the supervision of the McDonald brothers. So those are some really big names in this area. This is outside my bailiwick, but I can read it. It is completed. The building was predominantly a Renaissance revival in style. It had an impressive clock tower on the top of it originally. That was supported by a massive wood truss system which still exists today upstairs. This is the earliest photo that I've been able to find of the building from 1890, and you can see here at the top the original structure of the building supported that clock tower, which was a very, very impressive structure. I can only imagine what it would have been like to walk down the street at the time to see the building. This is a picture of that wood truss system, which does still exist today and is right above your head. So this is what is right over the courtroom here, and that is what supported the roof in that original clock tower. Unfortunately, by 1896, so the building hadn't been around very long, but they kind of noticed that the walls were starting to buckle. And the county officials at the time said, that doesn't seem like a good thing. So they went out and hired another architect who was very well known, Samuel Hannaford and Sons, who came over and did an analysis of the building. And what they found was that the clock tower and the wood truss structure was so heavy that they had not designed the load-bearing walls to support that weight. So the building was literally collapsing on itself. So, you know, in today's day, if the county built the building in 1889, by 1896 it was falling down, they run us all out of town. But at the time, they kind of took a look at that and tried to decide what to do to remedy the situation. And they decided that the only way to really save the building was to remove that weight. So they went up and actually cut off the top of the roof, took out the clock tower, and at that point they put up what's there today, which is, anyone?
The bell tower.
The bell tower, the cupola, yes. So that's what we have today. So on a day where it rains, sometimes you can actually go out and you'll still see the line where they cut the roof off, where that clock tower stood. So that's what we have today. That's the way it looked originally. So, like I said, it would be very gratifying to go back in time and be able to see this building as it was originally designed. It's a very impressive structure. Another interesting fact about the building is that it has a twin. We just realized this about 15 years ago, and it was really by happenstance that we figured it out. Our county preservation officer, Matt Becker, was doing some research and ran across this building in Bandera, Texas. He contacted them. They swapped pictures back and forth from the interior of the building and the exterior of the building and found out that it was pretty much an exact replica, only sandstone, I believe, instead of brick. So they figured out was the original designer of this building. Apparently, wanted to make a few bucks pretty easily, went out and peddled the design of this building in several other places around the country, and this one happened to be pretty much an exact replica. There's some similar courthouses in many areas in Kentucky. There's 5 or 6 counties that have county courthouses that are very, very similar to this one here in Boone County. So a little interesting fact, if you're ever traveling in Texas and want to stop by Bandera, you can feel right at home. Got some shots just from the early days. These are, I think, very interesting photos just to kind of give you a little flavor of what the courthouse has looked like from its early days. The courtroom here, this is from a newspaper article. It references the Kiger trial, which you may have heard about, a very famous trial that took place in this room. And you can see this is where we are right here with the curved area here and our columns right at the front with the judge's bench, which would have been right here in front of the building. So again, just some pictures from the early days of the courthouse. There's Judge Cropper, Judge Riddell, one of our maintenance folks, painting the courthouse windows. Really, aside from some remodeling here in the courtroom, the most significant renovation occurred to this building in 1959 when the county decided they needed more office space, and they built the annex, which connects through this door right here, which used to be a window, and through an office on the first floor, and provided some additional office space to the county. A lot of people think that was sinful, and those people should not be looked on very favorably who made those decisions, because it did really impact the look of the courthouse.
Yeah.
There was actually some very brief discussion about whether we should remove that as part of this project, but we've kind of run into the situation now that that annex has been here so long, it's sort of got its own historical significance, and we're kind of in a catch-22 there, putting the original courthouse back versus maintaining the significance that we have in the annex. I'm kind of glad that the annex was there for one reason, and that is in order to make this room handicap accessible, provide an elevator. The annex did give us the space to do that without damaging any part of the original structure. So if for no other reason, the annex was helpful for that purpose. Again, I think it's very interesting to note when you look back through history, for a large period here in Boone County, the courthouse that we're sitting in was the seat of county government, which included all county offices. So everything from the court system to the county sheriff to the county clerk, the county judge, all of those offices were located in this building. So all of Boone County government was in this facility, which is hard to believe today, because I work in the building next door, which is a lot larger than this, and we're even getting cramped over there. And we built the Justice Center across the street. So amazing to see the growth here in Boone County, but to think back that all of those offices were located under this roof at one time. And really, it wasn't that long ago. Again, when we moved the offices next door in the early 80s, District Court moved next door, the county administration offices, the Boone County Police, all of those folks moved next door. But Circuit Court continued to use this courtroom until the Justice Center was opened right across the street in 2003. So in the grand scheme of things, that's not very long ago. From 2003 until 2017, this building largely sat vacant. There were a couple of offices on the first floor that supported the drug court, which kind of filtered across the street. The annex was in use for child support offices, which are under our county attorney's office. And right behind this wall here, our historic preservation officer had an office in this building. So there was some minimal activity in the building, but largely it's that vacant. And what happens when you have a vacant building is it really starts to deteriorate pretty rapidly. When things happen like water penetration, it may go for a week or two and nobody realized that. So those kind of things were happening. Air conditioning units would overflow in this room, and we may not catch that for a couple of days. And so that really takes the toll on the building. You can see here, this is the way that the courtroom left. It was almost eerie. You would walk in here, that's when the circuit court moved across the street, everything was new. They didn't take anything with them. It sat just as it did the day they walked out of here. And that's the way it looked the first time I walked into the room, just as you see it here on the screen. See in the upper left-hand corner, they had added a fire escape right where this window is. So they had taken the window out and added a fire escape so they would have a second means of egress and regress. They had converted some of the offices downstairs into some small courtrooms. You can see the back side of this room here. And one of the things we'll see later, and I'll point out now, it's hard to see on this, but this room used to have a slope in it. We left it. If you look over on either of the side walls, we actually left the slope in the building so we'd always be able to remember that was here. So it was a kind of a theater style feel. When you came up the steps on the back, you actually went up 2 more steps to get into the room. It was theater style and sloped back down to the front of the room. So that was the way this room looked. This is one of the rooms in the back here, so you can see that they really just kind of picked up and left. You can see the water stains here in the ceiling, the disrepair in the walls that the building was experiencing. Again, just some pictures. You can see here, as I said, when you came to the top of the stairwell, there were actually 2 steps that went up into the courtroom doors. The original benches that sat in the building. And then back in the 70s, when paneling was all the rage, they put paneling everywhere in this building. They did quote-unquote remodel in the 70s, so the judges' chambers were all that 70s paneling. It was all through the downstairs. Very, very attractive. But I guess considered an upgrade to the original. But that's the way it looked. These were the drug court offices here. So that's a picture of what was in the building, kind of one of the last offices in the building before they moved for the renovation. This was the office, which is now the women's restroom on this floor right behind us. You can see, apparently we didn't pay the bill. You can see we had very significant issues with water penetration. The large roof above us, the slip roof, has really never had a problem in terms of leaking. But the design of this building had the four kind of jut outs where there were offices. Those all had flat roofs, and all 4 of them leaked like a sieve. So it was a design flaw in the building This is one of those areas that had the flat roof. And you can see our historic preservation officer had an ingenious system here, plastic wrap to kind of collect the water that rolled into the trash can. So not the most ideal situation. This was the judge's office, which is right here to your left. Again, you can admire the wood panel. The other thing that we had seen on this building, the county at some point had decided that the building was dirty and needed to be cleaned, so they sandblasted it, which, as we know, is the worst thing you could possibly do to the brick building. So it took that protective coating off the brick, allowed water penetration, and we saw significant damage to the brick exterior of the building. In fact, some of the areas were crumbling. This is one of the worst. When they built the addition with the annex next door, it also exacerbated that problem because the whole east side of the building where the annex sits does not get any direct sunlight. So as the water would penetrate the brick and freeze and thaw and freeze and thaw, it never completely dried out. And when you would walk up and down next to that, it almost looked like it was snowing orange because the brick was flaking off to such a large degree. So at that point, when we started this project, the county really was at a crossroads to say, if we're going to save the building, we really need to act now. Because our architect kind of told us if you guys would have waited another 5 or 10 years, the brick damage would have been so significant, it would have been very difficult, they thought, to really save the building. But in 2017, the county made the decision to move forward. Judge Executive Gary Moore and County Administrator Jeff Rowley-Wine, who are my bosses, sat me down and, as I said, kind of charged me with the project. The good news is both the judge and Jeff and also our historic preservation folks, when we met with them, all were in agreement that we didn't want to rehabilitate the building and put a velvet rope around it. They wanted to see the building come back to life and be used for a purpose and have people back in it again and breathe life into it. So what we did immediately was form a committee. We had members of the county staffs, like our property maintenance director, our building inspector. We reached out to the local business community, so we had some local business leaders on that group, some of our historic preservation representatives on that group, and we began to talk about what kind of purpose did we want the building to serve in its next life. So we actually went out and conducted a survey of our citizens. We got about 300 or 350 responses back, and overwhelmingly what the community told us was that here in downtown Burlington, in the county seat, there really isn't a community gathering space. You know, we have the library just down the street, which is very hard to reserve. It's one of the reasons we're here tonight, because of the demand. But there really wasn't a place for the community to come together here for meetings and activities, events, and social opportunities, and those kind of things. They really wanted to see life breathe back into downtown Burlington and saw this as an opportunity to do that if we could rehabilitate the courthouse and kind of turn it into a community center. So overwhelmingly, that's kind of what we heard, that folks wanted sort of a multi-purpose space that they could gather in and do various things, and that's kind of the direction we went. The team really believed that we had kind of two opportunities. One, to save the building. So first and foremost, our goal was to preserve this beautiful icon in Boone County for the next 100 or 200 years. And we knew we were going a bad direction on that. If we didn't act very quickly, the building was going to continue to deteriorate to the point that it would have been very difficult to save it. And secondly, we saw that enormous potential. A lot of times here in Burlington, when county government closes down at night or leaves on weekends, it's a little bit of a suitcase town. And that's strategically one of the things we've talked about at the county level is how do we kind of turn that back around and bring some vibrancy back here to downtown Burlington into the county seat. And we really think that the historic courthouse can serve as a catalyst for that as we have activities and events here. We had a very interesting situation while we were having this discussion. Some representatives from the Union Community Theater, who used to perform in the city of Union, sort of got evicted because the state building inspector went in and said the facility really wasn't where it needed to be holding public events. So they had already cast a play and were kind of ready to start rehearsal, and then were homeless. They heard about our project here and called us up and came and met with us and said, is there any way we could do this over in the historic courthouse? Of course, I immediately said, I don't see any way in the world that's going to work. The building is in such a state of disrepair. We really don't have good restrooms, access issues, all those kind of things. But county government here in Boone County, we're not a say no kind of government. So we said, look, we'll get the fire chief and the building inspector and all these people around the table, and if you can convince them that you can do it, we'll work with you. Fully thinking that there was no way in the world that was going to happen. Well, fortunately, our Burlington fire chief, our chief building inspector, and all those folks are also kind of not say no sort of people. So they laid out their vision for what would need to happen to allow that to move forward, and lo and behold, the theater company was able to meet all those requirements. And before we closed this down for renovation, we actually did hold High School Musical in this room. It ended up being a wonderful experience. It gave us an opportunity to sort of test drive that theory of using this as a community space, and our local business owners came over and hugged us. They talked about how their business doubled and tripled for the month and a half between rehearsals and the plays and those kind of things. So they started calling saying, when is this renovation going to happen? Because it's been great for business. So we really are hopeful that this will serve as a catalyst and kind of become a community center that will bring some vibrancy back here to downtown Burlington. So at that point, our committee went to the fiscal court, said we've completed our study, we've got our community input, we've sort of got everybody lined up and on the same page with the vision for what the building should be used for and how it should look, and asked our elected officials for support moving forward. The fiscal court, I think, recognized the historical significance of this building and its importance to Boone County historically, but also the potential it had to do the things we talked about, and we're very supportive both in terms of the project itself, but also approving the money that we needed to move forward with the construction. So at that point, we had Webster Architects, who were our partner, who kind of designed what the building would look like, and Century Construction was our partner as the general contractor on the building. And in 2017, we kind of hopped on the ship and took off sailing, and we got to work. So this is really kind of where I can talk to you a little bit about the transformation of the building from where it sat during those 14 or 15 years as a vacant facility into where we are today and where we hope to be. The very first thing that we wanted to take a look at in this building, and as you walk through it, you can see there's a lot of great history throughout the building and a lot of great things to see. But the old courtroom here on the second floor clearly is the centerpiece of the facility. But we had been told for years and years that this building was originally designed with this beautiful pressed tin ceiling, and everybody talked about how the rumor was it still existed up there underneath this really attractive acoustic tile thing that they decided to put up back in the 70s. So we got into the room, and this is the way it looked when we started the project. You can see our lighting is really kind of a church theme. And all of this, these were all acoustic tiles that were up there. So we had our property maintenance department actually get up on a ladder and abate a section, and lo and behold, when we started to pull that down, we found they were right. There did exist, there were remnants of this original pressed tin ceiling. Now, someone who should be horsewhipped decided to nail furring strips right into this beautiful pressed tin ceiling and hang the acoustic tile that you see there on the left. But when we abated a full section, we found, it started right here above me, the entire section of tin still existed when we pulled all those acoustic tiles and the furring strips off. So we got very excited, kind of crossed our fingers and said, as we go across the room, we really hope that's the case. We had to hire a company to come in and help us because that pressed tin was painted with lead paint. And as we know, that's not a good thing. So we actually had to have a company that specialized in lead abatement come in and scrape all the lead down. So they went in and took the acoustic tiles down for us, and been abated. You'll see here, it looked like ET up here for a little bit. When we were at the final stage of the abatement of the acoustic tile, we found that the entire pressed tin ceiling in this room existed, with the exception of the very middle. So where the original fan, right above you, where the fan sits today, we had this sort of almost a Christian cross right in the middle of tiles that were missing. Nobody knows the purpose for that. We've had some speculation. Some people think that when they took the clock tower off, that those might have been removed to help accommodate that. Some folks have speculated that there may have been a chandelier in the room at one time that was in that area, but we're not 100% sure why that is the case. So we kind of thought long and hard about where we wanted to go. Did we want to try to remanufacture the tiles to match? Or did we want to go a different direction? And at the end of the day, we had about a dozen tiles that you see around the room that had holes that were pretty big and very difficult to repair and make look right. So we made the decision to pull the tiles out of the middle section, replace the damaged tiles, and for heating and air conditioning purposes, we had this design with the large fan that you see, and just kind of decided it would be better to sheetrock that middle section. We're fortunate that it was dead center, so it almost looks like we planned it. And then we use those other tiles to both replace, and then we've got some stock of 10 or 12 of those tiles in the event that we ever have a situation, so we can make sure that the ceiling stays viable. There was an interesting piece to the middle section, and it's really difficult to see here. But in the four corners of the middle section, there were 4 panel tiles that were unique, the only 4 in the entire room. And so when we pulled those down, we decided we were going to retain those as art, and you see them on the back wall today. Our property maintenance department took those, and they actually saved some of the timber that was in the sloped floor joist, and they cut those floor joists down to make the frames. So everything on the back wall was historically accurate and original to the room. We stripped one of the tiles down on the left, so that's what it would have looked like when it was bare tin, when they had just pressed. The second one is the original color of the room, so we took that one, just soap and water, and cleaned it off. The third one, the one on the right there, is what that tile looked like after about 100 years of nicotine and coal dust. So if you need any encouragement to stop smoking, see what that did. And then the one on the right represents the color that we have up on the ceiling today. So those 4 tiles were unique, the only tiles we found in the room like them. But we were just tickled to death that every other section of the ceiling existed as it did back in 1889. We were able to bring it back to life. Another, what we kind of considered an atrocity with this structure was the fact that they took this window out and they added that fire escape. One of our project goals was to put that back as close to original as we could. We felt that it really was not attractive from the outside, which you see here, or from the inside, which you'll see in a minute. So you can't see where they had bricked the window up and put that door there. When we were able to take everything out of the room, we took up the flooring. This is what the room looked like when we were in the demo process at the beginning of the project. And one of the most unique parts of the project was the fact that when we got down to the floor joists, they ran 3 different directions in this room, which I've never seen before in any project I worked on. And we talked with the architect, and we talked with our chief building inspector and said, any idea what was going on here? And the only answer I could get was field engineering. As you can see here with the floor joists are running this direction, so we're right here. So they were running like this, which made sense because this is the main hallway on these 2 sides. They were bricked all the way up and they were supporting the weight there. On the left and right side, though, they turn twice, and in the back of the next picture you'll see they run a different direction in the back corner. So it was pretty interesting to pull that up and find what they were doing underneath the floor. So this area here is this back corner. So it was actually steel I-beams that were on brick arches supporting the weight in that corner. So you had that going on here, floor joist going this way. This on the two brick walls, you had the floor joist going this way, and then over here it turns again and goes a different way. So we stopped, brought a structural engineer in for a second time and said, we're going to put people in here. Is this really going to support the weight and be safe? And they did their analysis and said, yeah, you're fine. But that was probably the most interesting find of the project, to pull that flooring up and see that. One of the things we had hoped to do in this room was to preserve the original flooring that we believe was really a subfloor. It was a pine tongue group subfloor in the room. The problem we ran into with the way the floor joist ran is you would see people walking across that, and where it was running parallel, it was flexing pretty good and gave me a little bit of heartburn as a lawyer. So we decided we weren't going to be able to save that. We went in and pulled it all up and put down a new subfloor, which you can see here. And you can see this brick piece here, that was where the original slope in the room was. And even in this picture, if you can rank it out, you can see how high the doors are here, because that's where the original entrance was. So we took those original doors off, moved them down, so the doors are still original. You can see in the back, those hinges are pretty impressive. So that was a little bit of a feat. And then we did a wood transom on top there to make up the difference. One of the other things that we changed kind of midstream in this project is the original design was they have the HVAC units here in the middle of the wall where you see them, which I didn't think too much about until they started to run the refrigerant lines and the drain lines. And I said, well, hold on a minute. We're going to have conduit running down from the top for electric and for the refrigerant lines and the drain line. This is going to destroy the look of the room. So they were able to go back and redesign that, and you can see in the room today and some other pictures, they were able to move those units all the way up to the top of the wall, which eliminated the need for all the conduit and drain lines running down the walls. So it was a good catch that we made before it was too late to fix that. And then over, hit the right button. There we go. You can see here from the inside, this is where the fire escape was, which is this window right here, which, in my opinion, was a lot less attractive.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what the room looked like. Here you can see we had the subfloor put down. We took the slope out, which allowed us to get up on the lifts to do the repair work on the ceiling and kind of keep the project moving along. Here you can see them they did quite a bit. They had every little furring strip, every little nail. They had a hole, so we had to get up there and putty those holes in and sand them down. So that's what we're working on here. It's really trying to get the ceiling prepped and ready to be painted. The area behind us, at some point, we're not sure when, this was all originally on the same level. As you can see, we have this kind of one step. We believe this was consistent all the way across. Not sure why, but at some point they actually raised this middle section up a little bit. We talked about, do we put that back to its original place? They got really nervous about starting to kind of pull the layers of the onion back there as to what they might find. So they came up with the idea of kind of creating a small stage space here, so when we have events, if you're not using the screen, you do have an elevated space. And then we were able to incorporate the technology here with the screen and that kind of thing. So you can see here they're framing in that stage area. Just kind of look at the room from the back to the front. And then you can see the ceiling once it was repaired and painted. So the paint color was an interesting process because our architects brought in a palette it was pretty tannish. And when I looked at it, I thought, well, we kind of have this gold tan wall, now we're going to have this tan ceiling. And so really the thing that's going to pop out of this whole project the most is the ceiling. And I said, I'm just not really feeling like we're doing it justice. So they said, okay, we hear what you're saying. And they went and came back with the silver. I said, well, I'm not really sure I'm feeling that either. So they finally came back and they said, I don't know, this is kind of out there, but we're thinking, what about a blue? I said, I love it. So when we did the dedication, I stood in the corner and it was very quiet as people filtered in. And it was very gratifying. And most people said, hey, I love that ceiling color. I was like, thank the Lord. I was kind of on the hook. That was one of the few executive decisions. I'm vetoing everybody. We're going to go bold. And hopefully you guys agree that turned out nicely. So this is our point to where we've got the ceiling painted. And this, you can see we've got the ceiling painted and added the lights and the HVAC units up there. In this picture, you also see this is where we started working on the window. So everything they had done in terms of bricking up the window, we unbricked the window to get that reopened. And then we had a company, you can see the casing here, that came in and just did a fabulous job taking measurements from the other windows to match that as closely as possible. And as you can see there to your right, they just did a fabulous job. So I have taken pictures and shown many people and said, I'll give you $1 if you can pick out a new window and from a picture. I haven't lost my dollar yet. So a real testament to some of the craftsmanship that was performed during this project.
Was it original glass in the other windows?
Yes, absolutely. I will tell you, about 15 or 16 years ago, the county put $250,000 into the facility. At that time, they did re-roof the sloped roof up on the top, so that was in pretty good shape. And they came in and completely rebuilt every window in the facility. So I wasn't here, but as I understood, they took every window out on site, rebuilt every window, all new ropes. They still have ropes and weights that operate the windows. So that was a blessing during this project because we had no electric for a long time over the summer, but we were able to open all the windows. And when you do that in this room, you get a really nice cross breeze. So all the windows in the building are original. They've been rebuilt, but they all work. And that was something we didn't have to do as part of this project. So all real except for, or all original glass except for the window. There was originally a window here, as I said, where they put the door as well, but nobody liked the idea of me putting the window back there. See here, it's being prepped. So they would take the brick out, kind of have the form ready to go. You can see here on the left, where we're getting the glass in here, and here on the right, when the casing in the glass had been restored. So that was a very interesting piece of the project. The gentleman who did it retired in December. I was very grateful that we got him because he was a real craftsman. But he reset that window 7 times. The whole building was shifted about 6 inches this direction. So we are a little bit on a tilt over 129 years. So when he would get the bottom all square and plumb, by the time he would get to the top, it wasn't work, so we had to unshim it and reshim it, and I think it took him 6 or 7 tries to get the window set to where it fit in there just right, and it was square and plumb, or as square and plumb and level as anything in this building is going to be. So we walked in after the window was set, we were like, oh wow, what a great job, it looks so good. We didn't realize that's who the gentleman was. And he walked over and he said, well, first of all, I'm usually gone by the time the client comes in and sees us, so I never hear that. So thank you. It really means a lot to hear that you admire the work. And secondly, if you had any daggone idea how hard this window was for me to get in here, you would realize just how great a job we did. So it was really gratifying to see that window put back. So as you can see, we made the full transformation there. These are some pictures of other rooms around the building and what they look like when we got them at the start of the project. This is the judge's chamber that we looked at before after we took the very attractive paneling down. This is one of the rooms on the other side of the building. This was the hallway downstairs. So this looks across. So this is the annex here. So this is kind of looking this way. You can imagine that downstairs below us. They even have a vintage sort of candy machines in the corner. And this is one of the main rooms downstairs on the first floor that we now have at our disposal as the meeting room. It's actually where we've been earlier tonight. So you can see the state of repair in terms of the plaster in the building was another thing that we found. Once we pulled the paneling off, it was in really, really bad shape. So we had to use some resources to bring the craftsmen to come in and do a lot of repair work on the plaster. It was to the point that if you tapped it pretty hard with your hand, the sheets were falling off. That plaster, which was plastered right up against the exterior brick, so it was in pretty bad shape. You can see here some of the brickwork. As I showed you earlier, this is that corridor between the annex that really doesn't get much sunlight. And you can kind of see down here along the ground, all of that orange. Those are the remnants of the bricks that had been crumbling. You can see here, we replaced about 40 to 45% of the brick on that side of the building because it just was in such bad state of repair. One of the interesting things you can kind of see back here where the annex meets, the bricks width that they were using in 1889, it was wider than modern brick. So, you know, we kind of had a little dilemma right up front. We knew we had a lot of masonry work to do. It was, do we try to find brick to match the width that might not be the exact color, or do we go with a more modern brick that they could color to match exactly, but our seams and the grout lines were going to be wider. We got really lucky that there was there was a historic building over in Ohio that had been demolished right about the same time we were starting this project, and the mason was able to secure the brick from that project. Brought that over here. It matched our brick pretty closely in terms of color and exactly in terms of size, and it really came out to look nice. The other thing that the McDonald brothers did for us unknowingly is when they built this building, for whatever reason, nobody knows, halfway up in the daylight, you'll notice the brick's two different colors. So we kind of said, well, the building's already a hodgepodge of brick, so we'd much rather have the grout lines all be consistent and consistency and the inconsistency in the brick. But you can see just how bad the building was deteriorating. You see all the moisture here where the mold was growing up the side, just in really, really bad shape. I mean, this was not too hard to demo. Here you can see the pile of brick. And this is what I was telling you about. This is one of the rooms downstairs where we literally just took a hammer and tapped on the wall and whole sheets of plaster were falling off. So all that exposed brick is where the plaster came off when we were doing our examination. One of the interesting challenges to retrofit a historic building is to put an elevator. So here you can see I think that one of those is me, looking down a big hole going, geez Louise, what do we do here? We had actually cut out a piece here. You can see that's in the ceiling right across from me through the annex. And we'll see some other pictures of the elevator shaft. But that's what it looked like at the beginning. Here you can see one of the small rooms downstairs, what it looked like. And this is almost hard to explain, but on this side of the building, where the county clerk's office was originally, the building was designed a little differently than the other side, and it was designed with a brick arch in the masonry to allow it to support more weight because of all the paper files and all of the additional weight that they had with the county clerk's office. So you can kind of see here, these are the linear pieces where those barrels would come into the I-beam. And those all existed in the room right below us here. So some kind of interesting history that we found when we peeled that back as well. Here you see the elevator shafts, so that's kind of looking down. Because of the existing nature of the building, it all had to be hand dug. So I did not envy those poor guys that were down in the pit for about 10 days, hand digging the elevator shaft out. See here, we're starting to put the rooms on the first floor back together. Because of the state of the plaster repair, our original project design was to repair the plaster and leave the original plaster on the walls. But it was in such bad shape, the best we could do was to kind of float that out level, and then we had to go back over with sheetrock on the first floor. Everything on the second floor was salvageable, so everything you see in this room or in the bathrooms on the second floor is still the original plaster that we repaired to the best of our ability. And so if you see it crinkle a little bit, we left all that for character. But we were able to save all that up here. This picture's a little dark, but there was also a stairwell that went into the basement of the annex here that we removed, which really cleaned up that whole look coming in and made it more accessible for wheelchairs and things like that to the elevator. So here we can see we kind of passed the demolition phase. You can see the President's Inn across the way there with our walls going back up. We've got some paint and ceiling grids, and so it was really kind of a fun piece when, at first it was demolition and you're tearing things down fast. You're like, man, this project's going to be done in a month. This is great. Then you kind of hit that middle section, you're like, nothing's happening. But, we're running line sets and HVAC and electric. The entire electrical service in the building had to be rerun. The county had brought the electrical service up to kind of a modern standard in a lot of the building about 10 years ago. So we thought we could piggyback off of that and just kind of extend the service levels. But when we peeled the floor up, we found hot knotted tube wiring running across the floor joist. The electrician said, we need to just scrap all this and start from scratch. So the building got a completely new electrical system, completely new plumbing system, and a completely new HVAC system. So hopefully those will all last for a good long time. But this was about the point in the project where we walked next door and it was like, wait a minute. I'm starting to kind of over the hump. I'm starting to see the way it's going to look when it's renovated. We've got nice color on the walls and the doors are coming back to life and those kind of things. So that was a fun part of the project. But the real moment of truth, when you knew things were going to be okay, is when you walked in and we had modern plumbing. So this building did have 2 bathrooms in it. They were really water closets down on the first floor. A guy my size had a hard time turning around in it. But we were able to take 2 spaces on both the first level and these 2 offices on the second level and convert them into bathrooms. So you can see here we've got nice new modern fixtures and toilet partitions and all those kind of things. So we've got bathrooms on both levels, which make the building accessible. So once folks are up here in the elevator, they don't have to go downstairs. And that was really the main reason we took the slope out of the floor, was we couldn't get people up here in an elevator and then down steps to the restroom. So that was one of the main reasons we decided to make this floor level. Bathrooms came along, and the people that worked in the building who would come and visit and see where we were at, once they saw the bathrooms, a little tear would start trickling down the cheek. I can't wait to get back. So this is kind of when we were nearing completion of the project. We went through a couple of ideas with this room. Originally, when we didn't really think that we were going to be able to salvage the ceiling before we got up and saw how much of the tin was still there, we were going to do a hardwood product throughout the room. Then once we realized that the tin ceiling was salvageable, we thought, geez, a wood floor and a tin ceiling, we're not going to be able to hear anybody in here. So we kind of went with a carpet outlet. During the course of this project, we were really happy to be approved for about $150,000 in historic tax credits to help offset the cost of the project for our taxpayers here in Boone County. When we went back to them and said, hey, we're going to make a change in this room and put down carpet, they threw a complete fit on us and said, that's not what we approved. We're going to pull your funding. There was no such thing as carpet back in those days. And we said, well, okay, is there anything we can do to leave? No, because we want to make it a functional room for folks. So they kind of thought for a little bit and came back and they said, well, what if you do a border, do carpet in the middle? It'll kind of have the appearance almost as a rug. It'll have that continuity with the period flooring around the edge. We can live with that. So we said, okay, that's really creative thinking. We like that. We're going to put down linoleum as a border and we're going to do carpet. And they said, no, absolutely not. You would never find linoleum in a courthouse at that period. We said, well, I have a bunch of it in my storage room that we pulled off the floor when we did the demolition. We said I think it's going to be a lot more durable, and it's going to be a little bit more connected to the history of the building. And bureaucrats, as they sometimes do, say, well, we don't care. It's going to be wood or nothing. So as you can see, we have this lovely hardwood border in the room to ensure that we would be eligible for our historic tax credits. But it did end up coming out, I think, to be pretty attractive. Was that we were able to tie in the staging area with it, so it ended up looking pretty good. That kind of how we got here with that. Again, just a little closer look at the border. It was quite interesting to watch the hardwood go down because, again, nothing in this building is square. So those guys really are running on this project, but they did a fantastic job to get it down. And this is kind of where we are today. This is before anybody was allowed in the building, so it was kind of spit polished and brand new. And right before we opened it for the dedication, these are the pictures we shot. The other interesting component of this building that was a little difficult to maneuver was how do you incorporate modern technology into a 129-year-old building? It wasn't designed for those kind of elements. So we got, I think, a pretty good compromise with not messing with the structural integrity of the room too much, but having the advantage of the sound system and the projector system. And this building, or this room, has actually kind of been interesting when we've done events in here because the acoustics seem to be a lot worse when people are speaking than the sound system that is calibrated for the room. So it's kind of, you would think the sound system with the power pushing out the voice would echo in here, but they did a really nice job with the sound system. It actually works a little bit better than when we don't use it. So we were able to get modern technology in here. The building will have Wi-Fi. We're in the final stages of putting that in, so the community room up here in the first floor both have Wi-Fi. And we've got the elevator, so we were pleased with kind of the blending of the old and the new to make sure the room is functional for us. We held our county Christmas party up here, so that was our first event really in the room was the dedication. We had a great turnout to come out and see the room in November, and a lot of elected officials here, and we kind of cut the ribbon and applauded and did all that. But really the first public event that we had in here was our Christmas tree lighting. So this year for the first time we were able to have everybody outside and do the lighting, but Santa was up here, and we had a lot of our folks from the Historical Society, and we had the trains and toys and things like that on display on the first floor. And it was just such a wonderful resource to be able to have people kind of get their cup of hot chocolate and come over here inside, be in the building. Gave us a lot of opportunities that we've never had in the past. So that was kind of our first public kickoff. And then we had our Christmas luncheon in here, so you can kind of see what the room looks like here when it's set up as a banquet facility. So very pleased with that. The last thing, I'm happy to answer any questions. To be honest with you, I haven't been paying too much attention on time. Hopefully it's been interesting. A couple of projects next, so we happy to answer any questions. Our architect was Hub Weber, the general contractor was Century Construction. The project cost on this, the total project cost was $1.6 million. We did offset about $147,000 of that with tax credits that we've been awarded, so we have not, the project has to be finished before you can complete that process. But so the original budget on the building was $1.5 million. That's what the fiscal court approved for it. And with the tax credits, we're going to come in right on budget. So I was very, very pleased with that. Probably not as pleased as the judge was. Very pleased with that. And that included not only the work that we did to the courthouse, but also a pretty significant upgrade to the annex as well. So it got all new carpet, HVAC, electric, everything that this building got, the annex also got. It also included some site work. One of the big issues that we had over here was the slope of the road to the north. When it rained, it sloped right into the front door. So water would just pour right into the front door of the building. So we were able to take that down about a foot and move the grade away from the building to, again, help with the water penetration. And then we spent a good amount of money on the roof between new box gutters, downspouts. We fixed all the flat roofs, adding insulation to give those slopes. Because again, the primary goal of the project was to protect the asset and make sure that the building was viable long into the future. So to be able to accomplish our goal of protecting the building, the brickwork on the walls, all those things, and do what we did inside to make it usable and attractive, I'm very pleased with the way that the project came out. We started the construction project in March of 17, although as I said, I started in August of 14, so that's when the discussion began. It took us about 2 years to get through a feasibility study, architectural concept drawings, and those kind of things. We started the construction project in March of 17, and we dedicated it in November of 17. So we had a really good experience with our contractor on this project. We were scheduled to be done at the end of October, and we cut the ribbon in November, so right where we wanted to be. And then again, I just would give my appreciation to our elected officials who saw the value in this project, the importance of this building as a historical icon to Boone County, and wanting to make sure that we protected it, kept it viable, but then also put it back into the use for our taxpayers and the public to do things like this and events in here. So for Judge Moore, for Commissioners Captain Flagg, Charlie Kenner, and Charlie Walton, I can't say enough in terms of my appreciation for their support on the project, and to make sure that we're able to sit here tonight and enjoy the building. So I will tell you, we are booking up fast, so we've got a lot of events that are happening over here. We actually have another event in here tomorrow night. We've got a lot of things from open public meetings, so if you're interested in learning more about what we're going to be doing in Boone County over the next 30 years, our Planning and Zoning Department will have an open house in here next Wednesday. So, you know, what a treasure to have this facility right here in Burlington, that we can now do those things where we used to have to go and find a school or another location, to be able to do those kind of public meetings right here in the county seat. Certainly a great asset, but we've got everything from public walks to banquets to public meetings scheduled in here so far. We're very close, we're all friends here, so I can tell you, even though it's not public knowledge yet, but we're very close to announcing an agreement with the Union Community Theater to make this their home. So we're hopeful that moving into the future we'll have probably 2 plays in here a year, and give our community the outlet, the creative outlet there to do that. One of their productions will be dedicated to the youth, so they'll be working with our school systems and give our students the ability to do that. So just a lot of neat opportunities that I think are on the horizon because we now have this facility here in Boone County and downtown Burlington. So certainly for me, one of the most gratifying projects I've ever worked on. I've probably done about a dozen construction projects in my career. I don't know that I ever learned as much as I did on this one. So renovating a historic structure certainly brings its own uniqueness and challenges, but just couldn't be more proud of the team from the very beginning who put together the feasibility study, and the public who worked with us on deciding what to do in this facility, through the architect and the general contractor, and where we are today. So it's been very gratifying, and I hope you guys have enjoyed the building as much as I have, and I'll shut up there and turn it back over to Tom. Unless there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Before I let you go, I want you to tell them about the graffiti.
Oh, yeah. One of the, I guess the pieces of folklore about this building, although it's true, is that above us there are 2 rooms. And what they were, I think one was probably used for coal at one point, where they was heating with coal, and there's some storage. But throughout the course of the history of this building, folks who have been lucky enough to get up there have left their mark by writing a little inscription and signing their name. So we were just trying to remember. I think the earliest inscription I remember seeing up there was from 1909. But there are a lot of really unique stories, some history up there. People talking about being trapped in the courthouse during snowstorms, floods down on the river, and those kind of things. And there's even one gentleman that was here, I think, in the late 40s or early 50s, who came back in the 90s, moved away and come back, and he's actually signed twice to say, here's my inscription back in the 40s and 50s, and then was lucky enough to return in the 90s. So some really interesting history upstairs, and Tell Tom I haven't signed it, but I'm going to ask him to let me before I leave. So that's really a neat piece of the history of the building.
Thank you, Matt. We covered some old business early on in the meeting, and now we come to some new business, and I think Pat has something for us. Do you have a motion?
Could I have some light? Thanks. I'm secretary of the society, but I also work at the Boone County Public Library. So I wanted to ask our society, the Historical Society, if you'd be willing to sponsor the library's application. The library wants to send an application in to receive a $1,000 grant from the Glider Lehrman Institute of American History. They have a grant called Revisiting the Founding Era, and it pertains to having with the $1,000, if the library receives it, we would receive primary documents in a 100-page publication to share with people in the county, and the library would produce 3 programs to draw people in to learn about the founding era. So my request is that if the group, the society, would vote to be a partner with the library to apply for this grant, and if the society could send a letter with the application. And I was making a motion for that. So thanks, Don. Probably need to see if there's a second.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? We have a second. Do you have any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. With that is the end of the meeting tonight. Be safe on your way home, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month.
Yeah, this was just, the ceiling is quite fun to watch through. Watch this thing come in, the person is.
Oh, Roger.
But really, other than that, the only way I can really tell is you can see the old weight system on these. These have the counterweights now. Step back. Good jump. That